Okay, welcome to another edition of The Invisible Hand on the Fireground. This is episode 17, and with me I have Chief John Sullivan from Brookline, formerly of Worcester. So John, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it, and maybe you could introduce yourself, let the people know where you're from, and a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Thank you for having me. I grew up here in Worcester. One of 6 kids, youngest of 6, Irish Catholic family. Nothing unusual there. Didn't have any fire service in my family history that I knew of anyway. And it was just one of those things. I kind of ended up married a girl. Her mother said I should get a real job, so she pushed me. She worked for the school department. She pushed me towards the fire department, and I got on the fire department in October of '87, I was fortunate enough to have. I've been in recovery now for 34 years, so I'm that guy on the fire department that no one ever knew as a drinker. So I got sober 6 months before I got on the job, and for anybody who's involved in any of the 12-step programs, they know it's a spiritual program. And, for me, that was, the first intervention in my life to be able to set me on the path that I'm on today, and obviously chief of department now, things have worked out pretty darn good for me. But I got sober in July of 1987, got off of the booze and all of the other extracurricular activities that I was doing at the time, and got hooked up with the fire department, and just set the course from that point forward. So I was lucky enough to hook on with some good folks back when I first started that took me under their wing. There was a few guys on the job that I used to see in the halls of AA. And they were firemen that had gotten the cure, taken the cure, or whatever you wanted to call it back then. And they took me under their wing in the fire department and said, you don't have to get involved in all of the other stuff that's going on. You can have a good career. You can do what you have to do, and you can still stay sober. And lucky enough, I consider myself one of the real lucky ones that from the time I put it down, I've never felt the need to go back and pick it up again. And in the spiritual life of the program, I turned my will and my life over to the care of God back when I did my 3rd step, and I've never looked back. I'm not one of those guys who asks every day to turn my will and my life over. I made that decision back many years ago, and I was taught by some old timers that as long as you wake up every day and you want God in your life, He'll be there. That's the paradox. That's where it comes from. You just have to open your heart up enough to have Him there. And truth is, He's always there. He was always there. You just weren't open to it back in the time. So that's how I got here. And I've had a really good career. I spent 6.5 years as a firefighter. I'm an engine company guy. Never really spent much time on the truck. Not that I don't appreciate what the truck guys do. Everybody has to have a hero. So we, as we say at a fire department, the outstanding firefighters. But I like to kid the truck guys. But honestly, we'll talk a little bit about the cold storage fire later. And Tommy Spencer, who was one of the 6 firefighters, was killed in 1999 at Worcester Cold Storage. And when I was a rookie fireman at Engine 9, Tommy was my senior man. And Tommy and his daughter and my daughter went to Catholic school together, and were best friends. And so happened Tommy got promoted. A few years later, I got promoted, and we ended up back in the same station down at headquarters. He was on ladder 2, and I was on engine 3 that night, and we responded to that fire together. And unfortunately, Tommy didn't make it. Him and his partner didn't make it. 2 of my firefighters, I had the fortunate or unfortunate, I guess, if you want to call it. I had 4 men and myself that night, and I took 2 of the firefighters with me, and Jay Lyons, who was my senior man, took Joe McGurk with him, and unfortunately, Joe and Jay didn't make it out that night either.
We talked earlier. I always make these assumptions. You're Sullivan, Irish Catholic, and
Right.
I'm Catholic. I'm a coward. I don't want to take any chances. I was raised that way. Went to Catholic school for my whole life, altar boy,
Sure.
the whole thing. So but I do tie the two together, And you
Sure.
mentioned that, yeah, maybe you're not as much anymore, but you do have a connection, the spiritual connection.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
So as the name
No doubt.
implies, on the show, on this podcast, it's the invisible hand on the fireground, right? And that hand is capitalized. And I've shared, and other firefighters have come on and shared, incredible stories of coincidences
Sure.
where that's the dangers of doing a podcast in a firehouse. You never know what's going to come on the pitch box. So, anyways, as I was saying, which I lost my train of thought now. So I was talking about
people sharing their experiences with the hand of God.
So that so other people have shared it, and everyone's sharing their stories. So you were involved with the Worcester fire, the cold storage, the 6, and I've had fires. Down here in the South Bronx, we've had mill construction. A very heavy timber. We had a cold storage warehouse right by Yankee Stadium. I had a few fires in there, and I get it, man.
Yeah.
Big space, 100, 200 by 200, 6 stories. This one in particular had the cork in the walls.
Asphalt
right?
impregnated cork.
Yeah, so it burned. It was just, the smoke was just like, like you couldn't see the hand in front of your face. And it got so bad. And large areas, so.
Right.
You're a lieutenant in Engine 3.
Yeah.
That night, and I remember that night. It's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking to listen to the tapes and everything that went on. So, you survived, and someone told me they referred to you as could have been the 7th firefighter, and you're here to talk about it. So maybe just what happened, how you felt that night, what was going on?
Sure. I mean, I think there could have been a lot more. I could have been 7, I could have been 9, I could have been 12. There could have been a lot more of us. And I believe, but for the grace of God, a number of us made it out of that building. And so I talked about earlier when we were talking about my senior man, Tommy Spencer. Tommy was one of the 6 firefighters that were killed that night, and he was the lieutenant on Engine 3. And ladder 2. I was on Engine 3 and Engine 16. So the station we were at, headquarters, had 2 engines and a ladder, and Engine 16, ladder 2, and Engine 3. And Engine 16 had got struck out on the 2nd alarm, so they were gone. And I was down on the floor listening to the radio, listening to the fire it was building, and things weren't sideways at that point. It was a pretty routine. They were stretching lines. They were trying to find the seat of the fire. It was just pretty routine at that point, And the chief McNamee got on, and we'll talk about him later, and he was the one that saved a lot of us. And he got on the radio and said, fire alarm, give me a 3rd alarm. And he didn't know what was about to happen, but being the chief, he was a good chief. He could project where this was going. And so I was down on the floor, and I'm getting just before the 3rd alarm struck. Tommy looked at me and he goes, I had already put my bunker pants on, because I was listening, and I had a feeling it was, going sideways. And Tommy looked over at me and he said, what the hell you doing? And I said, I'm just getting ready. He goes, we ain't going. It's 2 districts away. We're not going. And within just a few seconds, third alarm got struck, and ladder 2, engine 3 both got dispatched out. So I had a good chuckle. He looked at me and laughed, and we got on the truck and made our way down there. And that was the last I saw Tommy. Was that moment. And Tommy was one of my best friends. He was my senior man when I was a firefighter. Taught me, the day-to-day routine, what it's like, to be a fireman, just to be ready and check your gear, check the truck, make sure everything's good, all of the important things that senior men do. And then it just so happened that he had a daughter and I had a daughter that were the same age. They ended up in Catholic school together and became best friends. And it was heartbreaking for me and for my family when Tommy's daughter came away at the end of that night without a father, and Kim's father, survived, and that was heartbreaking. It was really, and that was the end of that friendship. It was just one of those things, 16-year-olds can't wrap their head around the fact that both dads go to the same fire and one comes out and one doesn't. But anyway, the first incident that night for me was we were staged, and we get a call. We get called to come in after the first Maydays, calls for help from the 2 rescue guys, and all the third alarm companies are going to be assigned to search and rescue to try to go find the 2 rescue guys who are lost up inside the building. And I had been engine 3 had been ahead of ladder 2 on our way down there. So as we were staged, we were pulling up underneath the highway just before you took the turn to get in front of the building. And I wanted to let the ladder get by me so that they could at least get a spot in front of the building. So I jumped out of the cab, and as I didn't want to get on the radio because they were calling Maydays and the chief was trying to figure out what he was doing. And I didn't want to clog up the radio. So I said, I'm just going to go tell ladder 2 to go by us. And I got out of the cab, and just as I did, a car came by and swiped the back of my coat and nearly took me out right on the street to start with. But they didn't. Tommy went by, and we went inside, and we were assigned by Chief McNamee. When we pulled up, it just so happened that 2 guys on my truck, Mark and Doug, got out on the officer side, and they were geared up. They were ready to go. Jay Lyons, who was my senior man, he was driving that night, so he didn't have any gear on. And Joe McGuirk got out on his side, and Joe had the second radio. We only had 2 radios on the rig at the time. Officer had one, and then there was one in the back. And Joe had it in his hand. And I said to Jay, Jay, get dressed, take Joe with you, and we'll meet you inside. And the Maydays had already, been given. We knew we were running out of time. I took my 2 firefighters and made my way to the front of the building, past Tommy Spencer and his crew as they were getting off the ladder, and went inside. And we got assigned to the 3rd floor. That was our assignment. One of the problems that we had that night was that the 2 rescue guys had actually made entry into the building from the roof. So smoke was coming from the roof originally, and ladder 1 and ladder 5 put their sticks up to the roof, and a bunch of guys climbed up over the ladders and got on the roof, and then found out that it was coming from the elevator shaft. And that's when the original call came in to Chief McNamee that there could be 2 homeless people living in there. And so the rescue guys talked to each other on the radio, and the officer asked the guys on the roof, can you make your way in? And we'll start from the bottom, you start from the top, and we'll do a primary of this building. And there was a terminal to the B side stairwell up on the roof. So they broke the door down on the roof and actually entered from the top. So when they lost their bearings, they had searched the top floor and had then gone to the next floor down. But they didn't know what floor that was because they hadn't come up the stairwell and counted the floors. and all they could tell Chief McNamee was that they were one floor down from the top. And Chief Mac looked at the outside of the building, and it was a windowless cold storage building. So normally when we pull up to a building, we count the windows going up the side of the building, and you can figure out how many floors there are. Well, that was not the case. So he didn't know whether there were 4, 5, or 6 stories in this building. You know, it was just a sheer brick face, front. So unfortunately, we kind of had to divide things up so we would cover more ground. We weren't zeroed in on exactly where they were. They could only say that they were one floor down from the top. So the fire was on the 2nd floor. I got assigned to the third floor search. Engine 7, which also came on the 3rd alarm, gets assigned to the 4th floor, and Tommy and the ladder 2 crew got assigned to the 5th floor, which is unfortunately technically where those guys were. They were on the 5th floor. There were 6 stories in this building. So as it turned out, Danny, I'm an engine guy. I follow a hose line in, I follow a hose line out. But I had learned in drill school, some 12 years earlier, if you're doing a search, stay on a right-hand wall or a left-hand search, whatever you're doing. And you and I know both, if we're in a bedroom in a regular, residential building, that works okay. It doesn't work great all the time, but it works okay. You get into a commercial structure like this, it just doesn't have the same, it just doesn't work well. And but I had never done a search like this before, but I had prepared myself for it, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And so we entered the 3rd floor, took a right. We got into one of the big cold storage rooms. I knew if we entered the B side of the building. If I went to my right, I was going towards the A side. I found the wall, go to the A side. I hit the A side wall. I continue down along the A side. I come to another wall. All right, so now I traverse down back in the opposite direction I had come from, but on the other side of the room. But that opened up into another room. So I kind of came around the wall into another room, back to the A side, and back deeper into the building, deeper into the building, deeper into the building. This right-hand search wasn't working. There was never a place where I found the D wall to come back to my original starting point. I just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the building. I got to the center of the structure where, if you know anything about this building, you know that there were 2 separate buildings that were put together some years later. And I got to what was referred to as the silver door. And I had a choice to make. I could either go through that door and continue the search into the next part of the building, or I could go past the door and try to find, the wall that would bring me back in the other direction, if that makes sense, if I'm describing that right. I made a decision not to go through the door. I called Chief McNamee and I asked him, I said, hey, do those guys have their pass alarms on up there? Because you remember back then, they were attached to your SCBA and you had to physically turn them on. They didn't come on like the new ones we have today when you turn your packs on. They were just attached, And he said, yep, they do. And so I made the decision. I said, I'm going to open this door. And if I hear pass alarms on the other side of the door, I'll go through. But if I don't, I'm not going deeper into this building. Now, I had never done this before. This was not like something that I could say, I had been trained on. I hadn't. It was just all the things that I had learned over the course of time. I put my head in the door, no pass alarms. So I closed the door again, and I turned to the guys that were with me and I said, you guys stay here. I'm going to crawl forward on this wall to try to see if I can find the next wall. If I can't find it, we're going back. So I crawled away from them until I got far enough that I couldn't hear their breathing behind me anymore. And I said, I can't I can't leave them there. They don't have a radio. They don't have anything. So I turned around on the wall and I went back and I got in front of them. And we led back the same way we came in. I always felt like I was kind of I quit, you know, that I should have gone into that door. I should have kept going, and I didn't. I went back, got in front of the two guys, and we crawled back to what I believed was where the door out was. And this is one of those times where the grace of God came into our lives, for sure, I believe, is that I crawled past the exit door. The guy behind me crawled past the exit door. The guy behind him was just about past it when someone happened to be coming up the stairwell and pushed the door and caught his boot with the door. And he grabbed Mark, and Mark grabbed me, and we got out into the stairwell. So that was one time. I talked to the chief who was doing the investigation long after the incident was over, and we didn't really know all the circumstances of how the six guys had ended up, where they had ended up, how far they made it in, all of that stuff. They were piecing those things together. And I was recounting this to the chief as part of the Board of Inquiry report. And I'm bawling, you know, I'm crying, and I had second guessed myself 6 ways to Sunday. This was probably 3 months after the fire. And I'm talking to Chief Giard, and he's recording everything. And I said to him, Chief, I got to the silver door, and I said, I'm sorry. I couldn't go through the door. It didn't make any damn sense. It didn't feel right. And I feel like I let everybody down, you know, because we still didn't know exactly where they were. That had not come out yet. And he shut the tape machine off, and he said to me, he said, John, he goes, I'm going to tell you something. He says, I probably shouldn't tell you this yet, but I think you need to hear this. He said, we've interviewed just about everybody on the fire ground that night. He says, you're one of the last people that we're interviewing because you lost men in the line of duty. My other two guys, Jay and Joe, had gone with Tommy and his crew up to the 5th floor, and they were with them. But he said, I just need to tell you that so far we've interviewed just about everybody on the fire ground. And other than the guys on the 2nd floor who were fighting the fire, we only know of 6 people who went through the silver door, and none of them came back. He said, so you decide whether you made the right decision or not. And I know that was God protecting us, you know, that I didn't have any secret skills. I didn't have it. You know, I wasn't a better fireman than anybody else. I'm still not a better fireman than anybody else. I just knew it didn't feel right. And I knew I had to, I just knew it didn't feel right. And despite my fear, I made the right choice. And as a result, Doug and Mark and I are all here today. You know, it didn't feel right for a long time. And it didn't feel right even after Chief Giard told me that, but I've come to reconcile that over the years to know that, you know, that was the right decision. And, you know, that it turned out that the guys were actually on the 5th floor. So they were 2 floors above me. So even if I had gone through the door, it would have been, you know, lemmings to the slaughter, because in fact, what I didn't realize until many years later was that if I had gone through that door, the actual fire would have been right below me, because the fire was on the 2nd floor. So when that side of the building eventually collapsed, we would have been the first ones into the soup. So, you know, I'm very grateful for, you know, the intervention that, you know, saved all of us that night. But the other piece of that night, and there were many other stories that, you know, other people had, but the fact that Chief Mack had the wherewithal to stand in that doorway at the bottom of the stairs after 6 firefighters were missing, to know that 4 firefighters, 12 of us or so went up looking for the first 2, and that 4 of those 12 were now missing, were now lost. For him to stand in that doorway and have the wherewithal and the cachet and the courage to say no more, we're not sending any more up, because we're not doing the same thing that we did. And I know, we'd have kept throwing stuff at the wall for any of our brothers to see if it would stick. And there were a lot of hurt feelings that night. There were a lot of people who wanted to keep going back in. But when we all went outside and got a little bit of distance from the building and we saw what had happened, the fire was just going through the roof at that point, and we knew that he had made the right decision. So, those are just a couple of the stories from just me, but there were 100 other firefighters on that fire ground that night, and many of them had similar experiences, that of courage and intervention. If you believe in that stuff, and I do, and there could have been a lot more.
Yeah, John, that silver door you're talking about, I could visualize it. It's a fire door, and it's got it probably has a fire fusible link on it. Closes, I guess, during most of the times they're left open. And you mentioned 2 things where I see God intervened on this one. And one was that you had something in your gut told you not to go through that door. And I'm listening to you tell the story, and I'm visualizing everything you're doing. You're doing this without a search rope, without a hose line.
Right.
And you're in this, I remember one time getting lost in a kitchen, right?
Right.
You're in a warehouse, 200 by
Right.
200, 4,000, whatever, 40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
You're talking about the impossible.
Right. We were in zero visibility down to about 6 inches, 8 inches off the floor. I could see the columns with my face down to the floor. I could see the columns in the room, and I could see the bottom of the wall. But other than that, there was really nothing to see.
Lights out. I get it. No thermal imaging camera, no search rope, no hose line, and you're just
no RIT training,
nothing.
nothing.
And you're expected now, you and your 2 guys, and you're on the wrong floor to boot, and you're above the fire. And
Right.
no,
we were carrying two bottles, Danny.
Yeah.
Chief Mack had said, grab 2 SCBA bottles and bring them up to those guys. Well, our training now, we know that even if we had got to them in zero visibility trying to do a hot change, it wasn't a RIT pack. We were going to try to actually take their bottle out of the pack, put a new one in. It was what we knew. That was all we knew at the time.
No, you made the right move, and I know firefighters, we do this to ourselves. We beat ourselves up because we should have done this, we should have done that, and
Sure.
We always dwell on the negative, right? You don't accentuate the positive, right? We're always focusing on, well, I should have done that, I should have done that, and in reality, what you did was just remarkable in itself. And then that second instance where I get it, you pass the door, and then just by chance someone comes out and boom, hits someone's boot, and then you get out. So because had you not found that door, I don't think we'd be talking right now, because you would have just kept going down the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
And you would have just, I know that feeling. It's a feeling of despair. I don't know if civilians would be listening to this, but firefighters get it. But there is no worse feeling of being lost in a lights out condition when you can't see the hand in front of your face. I try to tell civilians, like when they try to say, well, what's it like? We'll try on Thanksgiving, open up the oven, right? And try crawling in there with a blindfold on. Now multiply that by thousands, like in a warehouse. That's not a good place to be. So, well, John, I have to tell you, I don't even know if we could really go on past this. I'm getting chills just listening to your story. It's just amazing. And I think this happened in '99. So this was how many, 20, now it's 22 years ago.
Going on 22 years ago this year. And,
I remember it like yesterday. And
yeah.
and that is pretty common knowledge. And It's taught in a lot of command courses. The chief,
Is
where he didn't, he said, "That's it, no more," and that was the most
yeah,
brave thing, even though it was probably unpopular. But
right.
I said, you had the picture of it before we started, and I mean, I've been to fires like that. I mean, you're talking about 6 floors of fire in that elevator shaft.
Right.
That's just it's insurmountable. It's
One of the
insurmountable.
things, just a short story, Danny, that I didn't realize until many years later that I think you and the listeners will appreciate. Um, there's many accounts of Chief McNamee standing in the doorway, with his hands across the doorway, essentially forming a cross, if you will, and standing in the doorway and saying, "No more. We're not letting anybody else up. We're not losing any more guys." And it wasn't until years later that Mike and I were talking about that. And Mark and I had gone up on a second search, on a second run up the stairs when ladder 2, when Tommy Spencer and his crew had called for help. And they called for somebody to get to the stairwell and start knocking and so on and so forth. And we did. We came to find out later that the collapse had happened prior to us actually getting up to the 5th floor landing. So those guys never answered us. I was actually calling the wrong company. I thought they had said, when I heard on the radio, I thought they had said ladder 4, but it was ladder 2. I just heard the latter part, and I thought it was this other captain who was on the fire ground. And by the time I got to the 5th floor and was calling out, "We're here, we're making noise, we're banging on the stairwell," ladder 2 had stopped responding to any calls. But at that point was when Chief Mack decided to dump the building, and they started to do a PAR. And that was the first time I actually had thought about where my other 2 guys would have been. I just kind of figured Chief Mack had given them another assignment and they would show up somewhere else. They would pop out of a doorway somewhere, or I'd go out to the truck and I'd find them out there somewhere. And so I said to Mark, I said, "Come on, let's go, we'll go down," because ladder 4 answered me and said he was all set. So we left the 5th floor landing and we went down. And when we got to the bottom, Mike was standing in the doorway. He had already told everybody, "We're not going up anymore." So I didn't actually ever hear him say that because I was still up inside, and I actually had to tap him on the shoulder to get out. And I said, it dawned on me later when Mike was talking about it. He said, "Yeah, I was standing in the doorway." And then this memory came back to me that when I got back downstairs the second time, he was actually standing in the doorway, and I actually had to tap him to get out of the stairwell, where he wasn't letting anybody back in the stairwell. So it was kind of ironic.
Yeah, I could picture that stairway. It's probably enclosed in a cement or concrete, and it's those return stairs where they have the metal rails and
Yeah.
Yeah, I could picture
Filled with
that.
hoses, zero visibility, and people tripping over each other and knocking into each other and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
but
Th-
I always do say, I know we're short of time here, but I always do say that, I always emphasize that this fire is not about me. It never has been. All these years, I've taught lessons on the cold storage fire for 20 years now, 20 plus years. This fire is about the guys who sacrificed their lives that night and the efforts that we put out. And all the praise for heroic action and for the loss, it goes to them. It's not about me at all. I just happen to be a small part of the story, and we're sharing that part of the story tonight.
Well, John, I really I can't thank you enough. The good thing though is that the positive, from this whole thing is that it revolutionized, I think, the whole concept of writ. They didn't die in vain. I know when I came on a job in '86, I've been to a few May days and collapses and whatnot, and it was just catch as catch can, all right, you two go there, you go there. And, there was no plan. And now, as a chief, I pray. I had a Mayday recently. I had a Mayday just a few months ago, and it was the real deal. And I couldn't even see the front of the building. And, but I have a plan, right? I have a plan. I'm going to have an engine. I'm going to have a truck. I'm going to have CFRD. I'm going to have a medics. I'm going to have a rescue, a squad, and a chief. And that's my rescue group. And they're going to work on their own channel. And they're going to, if I get because I'm down here in Hunts Point, and I'm loaded with factories. I have probably half my district is factories like the cold storage place. And let me tell you that I drive around this place and I say to myself, I think of your fire in Worcester. And I said, yeah, for the grace of God, I could have the same. And I tell my guys all the time, I said, search ropes, thermal imaging cameras, team up, truck companies together. We're not freelancing.
We've had hundreds of accounts from folks across the country and across the world who have contacted the fire department, Mike, myself, whoever, to say, we did things differently because of your fire. If it wasn't for your fire, we wouldn't have this, we wouldn't have that. And I'll just share one other quick story with you, whether it makes the show or not. I was in Germany. I'm in Hamburg, Germany, doing a program for the Hamburg Fire Department. They have an air management conference every couple of years. And they had a hands-on, and then they had the lecture part. And I was there to lecture. We're at the hands-on feature, and one of my hosts, firefighters, says, "Hey, the guys from Berlin Fire want to talk to you." So, anybody who's a history buff about fire knows London Fire Brigade, Berlin Fire Brigade, probably two of the most storied fire departments in the world because of the blitzkriegs and all the bombings and everything. And so I'm like, oh yeah, sure, great, and the Berlin guys come over, and they have a team. It's called ANTS, ANTS. I couldn't tell you what the long German word is for ants, but it's essentially red. And this guy wanted to come. His name is Dirk Perel. He's a friend of mine on Facebook, and we stayed in touch. And Dirk was a captain, basically the captain or battalion chief of the ANTS squadron. And he wanted to come meet me and talk to me to tell me that if it wasn't for the Worcester cold storage fire, the Berlin Fire Brigade would never have this capability, that it was as a result of what they saw from us half a world away. And they realized that if this can happen in Worcester, it can happen in Berlin. And they to this day, we stay in touch, and there is a dedicated ANTS team in the Berlin Fire Brigade just for firefighter search and rescue. And it just shows the impact of the loss and the impact those 6 guys had on the rest of the world in the fire service across the world.
Well, thank you, John. You have to excuse my children in the background, but they kids will be kids, as I say. Well, John, this has been such a blessing. I've had 2 blessings today. I had to do 2 shows because I'm doing a month-long bike ride to honor guys that are dying from cancer on 9/11. So I'm doing a 3-week ride from Naples, Florida to Ground Zero, coming in on Ground Zero. Then 2 days later, I'm doing a 400-mile ride from Montauk to Arlington for the Wounded Warriors. So I'm kind of back to back, and 2 blessings today, meeting you today and Pat Kenny. I am just amazed of this story. I if it's up to me, hopefully God willing that we're just going to keep the memory alive, because how soon we forget, and I learned a lot from you, just from your, like I said, I could take pictures. I could tell you, I have at least 100 factories down here, and I dread. That's my biggest fear. It's not these private dwellings and multiple dwellings. It's these factories, and definitely not something that we should take lightly. So, John, thank you for being here. Just a real quick plug to 3 a.m. I know that we've both met 3 a.m. The Florian Group, and they're working on a program actually to help firefighters get located in areas like this. And you and I are going to work together on that. So I really look forward in the future working with you. So
you too, Danny, and thank you for having me.
All right, John. So Thanks for being here, guys. God bless. And until next time, be safe.